What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be teaching you how to use Lightroom. I made this huge cheat sheet for myself, so I'm going to hang that up on my wall and we'll get started. Okay, so up top here we have our histogram. This basically shows the data that we've got in our picture. Whites, highlights, exposure, shadows, and blacks. Basically, if you see a bunch of your data here, this is all the stuff that's collected into the photo on the left. That means it's a darker photo, and as you can see, it is a much darker photo. Basically, this is great because it'll tell us whether it's overexposed or underexposed, and in this case it's a little underexposed, so in a little bit we'll just raise that up with the exposure slider here. Now, as you can see up top here, we have some clippings, and if I hover over that, it shows a little red on the photo, and that shows where it's completely white. And then if we scroll over here, and as you can see, there's no clippings on the darks, so that means there are no absolute blacks. It'll show another color here to signify that there's complete blacks, but we could also bring down the highlights in a bit to get that detail back into the sky. Next is white balance. Basically, this is your drop down menu if you don't feel like messing around with the sliders that much. You have auto, daylight, cloudy, shade, tungsten, fluorescent, flash, and custom. That's if you wanted to play with the sliders on your own. Now, this is a raw photo, and you get all these options if you have a raw photo, same as you do in your actual camera. Now, if this was a JPEG, you'd only have as shot, auto, and custom. Now, the sliders. Temperature. Temperature is if you slide it all the way to the left, that'll cool the photo down, that'll bring out the blues, and as you can see, that's very blue, that's too blue. If you bring it up all the way to the right, that warms up the photo and makes it look all golden, this yellow temperature. And then your tint, basically all the way to the left is the green, and then all the way to the right is the magenta, and this is where you can get pretty creative with how your colors look. Next is the white balance selector. Okay, so you take your selector and choose a color in which you think would be the white balance. Let's go right there. And as you can see, it raises the magenta and basically does the work for you. I hardly ever use this tool. I just like setting up my own white balance, and really brings out the creativity once you really learn how to use the white balance. This is the exposure. I don't know what's happening there. The exposure little icon there is not working, but basically all the way to the right, super bright, overexposed, all the way to the left, really dark and underexposed. Something's going on there with that. Oh, that's the clippings. Let's see if that'll. There we go. So basically, as you can see, that's completely dark to white, and I like to really basically the exposure is varies between each photo. So basically, you want to play with that every time you work with a new photo. Next is the contrast slider. Defines areas of light and darkness. So as you can see, if I slide it all the way to the left, it's a very flat image, very dull, boring, and let's bring it back to 0. This is default, and all the way up, as you can see, it really brings out the whites and the darks, and as you can see, it got a little too dark there, so we don't always bring the contrast up to 0, and it can really make your image pop if you use it right. Next is highlights. Highlights is what is going to fix a little bit of this white clipping here. So basically we just bring that highlights down, and that really brings out the color, or not the color, the detail into the clouds. Next is shadows. Shadows, bring it up to the right, that'll bring out the detail in the shadows as you can see, and then bring it to the left, that'll make it more dark, not as much detail, so we definitely bring it up around here to make sure we can see that wave, and we'd bring the highlights down so it's not too bright. Next is whites. Whites, you could hold shift and then double click, and that will, Lightroom will set the whites to what it believes to be a good balance for the photo, and I like to do that because most of the time Lightroom gets it pretty on the dot with the whites and blacks, but most of the time I'll kind of do a few adjustments on my own. And whites, basically it's brings out the whites in the photo and bring that down. It kind of gives a little more detail there, not much. And then the blacks brings down the blacks or brings in the detail into the blacks. Next is clarity. Basically kind of works just like contrast, gives it a little more detail though. So let's go ahead and slide it down all the way to the very bottom. And as you can see, it's created a very dreamy look to the photo, and not as much popping or detail to the image. That's very nice if you want to get a soft image with like a portrait or something, but we'd want the clarity a little higher on this photo, but I'll bring it up to 100 to see what you see. And as you can see, the clarity pops like insanely. It's kind of cool, but I see this overused a lot where the clarity is at 100. It just doesn't look professional, it doesn't look good. So we'd bring it like around 35 or so if I was editing this photo. Okay, next we have vibrance, which increases the color of muted colors. So basically increases the intensity of muted colors. So see this here, blue is probably going to get a little more bluer as I bring it up. As you can see, it has increased the intensity of the muted colors, kind of left the good colors alone, but already this image was pretty flat, so it basically all across the image brought up the colors. Saturation will bump up all the colors to a much higher intensity, so basically it just brings it all up. And as you can see, it doesn't bring out more color, it just uses the color that's already there and just makes it more vibrant. And I'm gonna end it right there because this video is getting way too long. Part 2 will be on Monday. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget, I forgot. Oh yeah, I got merch.